All right, welcome to the Medlock Post Radio Show. I'm your host, Richard G. Medlock. We're listening to The Sounds of Patriots, a beautiful song, little bagpipes there. This is where we educate, entertain, enlighten, and empower. Today is July 5th, 2022, and today's episode is Liberal World Order. Say what? And we're going to get into that. So let's fade out this music. It's beautiful music. It's beautiful music. And long weekend, July 4th weekend, a lot of celebrating. Some tragedy that took place, and we'll discuss that later on. But America is still standing, folks. The views and opinions on the Medlock Post radio show are the views and opinions of the host. They are not necessarily the views and opinions of Spreaker.com, its corporations, affiliates, or any other podcast streaming services. Let's start out with a quote from Ayn Rand. Quote, "I want you to look at the birth of a miracle, the United States of America. If it is ever proper for men to kneel, we should kneel when we read the Declaration of Independence." Unquote. She escaped from Russia, from communism, came to America, and fell in love with America, capitalism, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution. And a lot of her writings reflected her feelings and how to overcome the falsehoods of the world concerning communism. So anyway, great quote. If it's ever proper to kneel, we should kneel when we read the Declaration of Independence. I wholeheartedly agree. And the opening monologue today is about the Declaration of Independence. So let's get started with that. The Declaration of Independence was adopted by the Continental Congress on July 4, 1776, and announced the separation of the 13 American colonies from Great Britain. With this, a new nation was formed, the United States of America. Now, I got this, what I'm going to read, from either Thomas Jefferson's site or Friends of George Washington. I can't remember. I didn't write it down, so I apologize. But this is not my writing. History verifies Thomas Jefferson as the composer of the original draft. Once completed, Jefferson submitted his draft to Benjamin Franklin and John Adams for their changes. Eventually, it made its final destination to Congress, where it was amended for the last time. Today, we see in it detailed wording why Congress was declaring independence from Great Britain. The most quoted line from the Declaration is, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Our forefathers were declaring that they not only deserved freedom, but were willing to continue fighting for it. Freedom is a great definition of independence, as it is the result of the choices we make in our life. The power of choice is one of the greatest freedoms we have in our country, and knowing where to find it is important, as we see in Proverbs chapter 2, verse 6. "For the Lord gives wisdom From his mouth comes knowledge and understanding. Let's review the 6 freedoms we must celebrate this July 4th. 1. The freedom to believe. Our country continues to serve as a magnet for oppressed individuals who come to the United States for an opportunity to capture their dreams. Many dream for a good job, food, and shelter for their family. But our government should not be relied upon as the only resource to replace our faith in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 17. Number 2, the freedom to live out our faith. In some countries, the mention of serving God or his Son means instant death. Our forefathers recognized the Creator through their extension of certain God-given rights in the Declaration of Independence. Our faith is the most important of all, as it gives us the foundation and assurance that God is in control of a world in chaos. And I say amen to that. Back to the article. When life seems out of control, seek the source of all creation, God. He will provide peace in the midst of all your life's storms. Number 3, the freedom to worship. We are allowed the choice to worship in any way we desire. God created us for fellowship. Our individual gifts are stronger when they are joined with our brothers and sisters in Christ. Sadly, statistics show worship attendance is in decline as more people choose a life of independence, which ultimately leads to a life of solitude. Choose today to ask God to direct you to a community in which to be involved. He will direct you to give and receive as needed. Number 4, the freedom of prayer. Self-reliance is an American lifestyle demanded and respected in numerous circles. Just as this can be seen as a strength, it can also be a tremendous weakness when it leads us to put God on the sidelines of our life and call upon him only when we need his rescue. In personal times of self-reliance, I sometimes take on an image of seeing myself as godlike, which results in my placing other gods before him, namely the God of me. By choosing to submit our request to God in prayer, we are making the choice to live out the faith to which he calls us. 5, the freedom to vote. Tens of millions of professed Christians don't vote. We must recognize in our nation every vote does count, as issues such as racial reconciliation, abortion, social services, and taxes continue to create further divisiveness. Our nation was founded on God, yet we continue to chip away at God's sovereign place of authority through the decisions continually implemented by the Senate, Congress, and judicial branches. As a body of believers, we must call sin what it is and stand united as we cast our votes through God's divine wisdom and direction. Number 6, the freedom of happiness. If you notice in the Declaration, one of the rights it is the pursuit of happiness. Galatians 5:22 says we can have real joy in our life as we walk in the Holy Spirit. We don't have to pursue happiness. Rather, we can choose to live it out in the Spirit. This allows us to receive what we richly deserve. So what about the disease, divorce, death, and disappointment we may receive along life's journey? Paul summarizes our responsibility well. Dear friends, Do not be surprised at the fiery ordeal that has come on you to test you as though something strange were happening to you. But rejoice inasmuch as you participate in the sufferings of Christ, so that you may be overjoyed when his glory is revealed. 1 Peter chapter 4, verses 12 and 13. The 56 leaders who signed the Declaration of Independence had the foresight to understand things had to change, so the generations who followed them would experience life, liberty, and happiness. They accomplished this for all of us to enjoy by having fortitude, a strong vision, and steadfast faith. As we celebrate this July 4th holiday, is it possible for us to have the same impact as our forefathers did for future generations? I believe we can, through the manner in which we act upon the 6 freedoms listed above. Legacy planning begins when you realize you will not necessarily complete what you began in one generation, but rather you become the visionary, understanding the importance of planting strong seeds that may be harvested by many future generations. Father God, as we celebrate this holiday, may we plant well so God will provide a bountiful crop which will be enjoyed by many future generations. That's the opening monologue. I wish I knew who wrote this to give full credit. It's beautiful. Ladies and gentlemen, part of the Medlock Post is to educate. Matter of fact, that's our main focus. And we're going to start today in an educational process to help you understand how communism has taken hold in the United States of America and has, in some parts, destroyed some of our society. And that's a sad thing to contemplate, but that is what's happening. And before I get into what I've prepared, I want to talk about what happened in Chicago this weekend, just briefly. The big news is the shooting at the 4th of July parade. That's just an awful thing. But let me ask you this. We had Democratic Socialist politicians last week screaming and yelling, let's burn the 4th of July. Let's do away with it. It doesn't have any meaning. There's no more independence. This was echoed in the propaganda media throughout the land. The Hollywood socialists jumped on this bandwagon. They must have gotten the tweet from the master that's controlling all this. So the Hollywood elite come out and start, let's burn the 4th of July. Let's do away with it. No more independence. Well, then is it surprising to you that someone that might be hurting from mental illness? We know nothing about the shooter yet. They just released that they captured him, and that's it, and his name. Could have mental health issues, could be on drugs, could be a foreigner, could be an illegal alien. We don't know. But with all this diatribe, hateful diatribe, going out from our government, from the media, from the Hollywood socialists, are you surprised something like this happened? When they're being told, let's burn down the 4th of July. It's just something to think about and what's happening in America. All right, that was my thoughts on Chicago. Let me give you the numbers. Up to Monday morning, there were 9 dead and 57 shot in Chicago. Now, this is a every weekend, this is what happens. It barely makes the news. But then a parade gets shot up and it's big time national news. So every weekend, several people are shot dead and bunches are wounded, and it's not in the news. So is there a conspiracy there? I don't know. Was this guy a plant? I don't know. There are people that think that the Democrat socialists are organizing these mass shootings so they can take our guns away. Don't fall for their diatribe. All right. Title of the show is Liberal World Order. Say what? Now, Joe Biden's director of the National Economic Council last Thursday let the mask slip when he was asked what we would tell Americans who can't afford high gas prices for years to come. Quote, what do you say to those families that say, listen, we can't afford to pay $4.85 a gallon for months, if not years? Now, this was Victor Blackwell on CNN. Well, Brian Deese answered it this way. Quote, this is about the future of the liberal world order, and we have to stand firm, unquote. Now, Brian Deese only said out loud what we have been knowing for years. Now, earlier Thursday, Joe Biden was basically asked the same question. And how long can we expect high gas prices? His answer is, quote, how long is it fair, or that the question is, how long is it fair, and fair is a crazy word, to expect American drivers and drivers around the world to pay a premium for this war? Biden's answer was, quote, as long as it takes so that Russia cannot, in fact, defeat Ukraine and move beyond Ukraine, unquote. Well, that's not the answer anybody wanted to hear. Now, what Brian Deese said, he just came out and said it, right? If you've listened to the Democratic Socialists for the last many months, they have literally explained who they are. Now, most of us have heard much talk about the New World Order, one world government, and now the Great Globalist Reset. Many United States presidents believed in a New World Order or globalism. They were Woodrow Wilson, Franklin D. Roosevelt, George H.W. Bush, the father, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, the son, Barack Obama, and Joe Biden. They all discussed this in speeches throughout the years. And you can go back and pull up those speeches if Google or some of those other search engines haven't taken them down. I used to have recordings of them when I did the other show, but I can't find them, so I probably did away with them. But let's look. I mentioned Woodrow Wilson. But let's look at where all this began, because it wasn't one man's idea. It was multiple ideas. And it has a long history. Much of this was derived from ideas and inspiration directly from the book of all dictatorships, Plato's Republic. Marx, Engels, Proudhon, and St. Simon drank from the same fountain as disciples of Plato. Plato is considered the father of communism. Now, and if you've never read Plato's Republic, I recommend that you read it and keep in the back of your mind, the front of your mind, freedom. All right. Cleon Skousen wrote probably the best summary of Plato's philosophy that I've ever read. Mr. Skousen wrote this, quote, Plato wanted a ruling class with a powerful army to keep it in power in a society completely subordinate to the monolithic authority of the rulers. Now, monolithic means one. So completely subordinate to the one. Back to Skousen. He also advocated using whatever force was necessary for the wiping out of all existing government and social structure so the new rulers could begin with a clean canvas on which to develop the portrait of their great new society. The upper dimensions of Plato's ideal society included the elimination of marriage and the family so that all the women would belong to all the men, and all the men would belong to all the women. Children resulting from these promiscuous unions would be taken over by the government as soon as they were weaned and raised anonymously by the state. This is me. Think of Nazi Germany. They grabbed all the teenage girls. They brought in these top specimen of men, and the men would have sex with the girls and started having babies. This was the beginning of creating the Aryan race that was going to rule the world. Okay, back to Skousen discussing Plato. Plato wanted women to be required to be equal with men, to fight wars with the men, and perform labor like men. There was to be selective breeding of men and women under control of the government, and children considered inferior or crippled are to be destroyed. Well, that's what they were doing in Nazi Germany. And probably other places too. It's probably going on in China and probably went on in Russia too. There was to be a 3-level structure of society into fixed classes. You hear that? Fixed classes. The ruling class, the military class, and the worker class. Plato said the people would be induced to believe a government indoctrinated falsehood that people were born with gold, silver, or copper in their souls, and the rulers would determine which metal was present in the soul of each person and assign him or her to the appropriate class. Wow. Again, falsehood, indoctrination. I think we see that today in America. Back to Skousen. Plato admitted all of this was falsehood, but said it would facilitate the administration of affairs by the rulers because it would be taught to the people as a religious principle. And we see that. Plato reserved the full blessings of communism for his ruling class. It would be there that he felt private property could be eliminated, family relations communalized, and intellectual energy devoted to determining what was good for the masses in the lower classes, unquote. That was Cleon Skousen describing Plato's republic and his layout for a communistic society. Does any of this ring a bell, folks? It should. Does the terms communism, socialism, Marxism, progressivism, and collectivism come to mind, as well as other words for this? Think of Russia, China, North Korea, and Venezuela. The terms that Plato used are not necessarily used by the ruling elites today, but the principles are the same. Now the question begs to be asked, are any of Plato's principles being used in the United States of America? And I'm sure some of you are sitting there, well, yeah, they are. Well, let's take a look to see if any are. Let's focus on a ruling class with a powerful army. The Democratic Socialists, or the left, and the GOP Socialists have become a ruling class with a powerful army. Now, you're going to say, who is part of that powerful army? Now, in your mind, were you thinking a military army? And you might have been. You might have been, but there's different armies. Can we say the media is part of that powerful army? The lies and propaganda it spreads sometimes is deafening. Can we say the American university system and public education system is part of that powerful army? Can we say the many government agencies who greatly abuse their authority is part of that powerful army? We just had a major Supreme Court ruling last week that addressed that issue. Can we say the American welfare system is part of that powerful army? Can we say lobbyists are part of that powerful army? Can we say the Internal Revenue Service is part of that powerful army? Can we say the Federal Reserve is part of that powerful army? And let's not forget the activist judges that serve on the federal benches as part of that powerful army. All right. So ponder those questions, that little list. There's some more we could add. We could add drugs, we could add inflation, etc. But let's go into a little more of a history lesson. And then we'll go through that list one by one. A little history. Woodrow Wilson was considered a Marxist. President of the United States, 1910s, 1920s, was considered a Marxist. The left has tried to cover that up for many years. But, and yes, it's a big but, after World War I, Woodrow Wilson spent 3 to 4 months in Europe during the Versailles Treaty negotiations, politicking for a one-world government. Say what? Yes, the President of the United States, which was founded on freedom for all people, was pushing for a one-world government. Now, thankfully, the other members of the Versailles Treaty, mostly the European countries, said, no, thank you. And the basic reason was they felt the United States would end up being the controlling power. And that might have been the case. And also during the negotiations, the Middle East, as we know it today, was formed. Prior to World War I, it was the Ottoman Empire ruled from Istanbul. It was all one country. It was the Ottoman Empire. It was the Muslim Brotherhood Empire that joined Nazi Germany and were their partners in World War II to try to take over Africa. So the Versailles Treaty, those governments decided, okay, we're going to punish you, so you can't do this again, so we're going to divide up. And then this is where you had the states of Iran and Iraq and Syria and Libya, and all those countries get formed. They weren't there before. They were just a people controlled by the Ottoman Empire. Wilson's chief advisor was Edward Mandell House from 1913 to 1921. He was a known Marxist. He did not make any bones about it. He preached socialism. And under his watch in the White House, he lobbied for a state-controlled central bank empowered to make U.S. money. And he got it. It's called the Federal Reserve Act, that Congress transferred power from themselves to a private bank. And this has been a disaster ever since. He also pushed and got the 16th Amendment, which created the Internal Revenue Service. Both of these were ideas of Karl Marx. Karl Marx, the second father of communism. Edward Mandell House also helped create the League of Nations that came out of the Paris negotiations for peace. Now, the League of Nations failed, but Franklin Roosevelt revived it during war or before World War II as the United Nations and centered it in New York. Mr. House also convinced Wilson to create a new organization called the Council for Foreign Affairs or Foreign Relations. Many others saw things as Wilson and House saw them from a one world order perspective. This body of individuals were to control things from behind the scenes. In effect, the CFR determines the foreign policy of the United States of America. It makes it look like the president is making decisions, but the president isn't making the decisions. From the outset, the commitment to form a one world government based on a centralized global financial system attracted the strangest mix of capitalists, socialists, communists, and idealists. This is one reason the United Nations kept getting more and more power through the years. Now, this is why we're here. We're trying to help you understand how things have been taking place over the last 100 years in America. I think you have a little better understanding of how America has arrived at this point in our history. And we will continue this discussion. All right, returning to the list of powerful Army members, I'm going to introduce you to some ideas and truth that might be tough to grasp right now. But listen, some of you are listening might think that they're just conspiracy theories. But as you learn more about the spread of Marxism and understand how events in America have taken place over the last 100 years, the light will come on. Okay, that powerful army that Plato discussed. And I'll list a few. All right, let's talk about the media. The media, since the mid-60s, have really turned against the American way of life. Now, what happened in the 60s? Those that aren't old enough and haven't been taught the right kind of history, we had Vietnam, we had protest, we had campuses taking over, students taking over the administration building, we had burnings, we had lootings, we had riots. Many cities, Washington, Chicago, Los Angeles, and other cities were burned down, parts of it. But the media started falling into the lines of those that were trying to destroy America. Let me give you one great example. It has to do with John Kerry. He served in Vietnam, and he came back. He went in front of the Congress and said that our soldiers were over in Vietnam killing and raping women and killing children and eating them. And the media spread these lies and had people believing it. Because one wacko person, John Kerry, came back who was an anti-American, anti-Constitution, came back and wanted to destroy the military and help destroy America. And he makes all these comments. Then he flies to Paris and over there meeting with the Viet Cong to figure out ways to defeat America. And he ended up a senator and a secretary of state and did a lot of damage in those things. But that's when the media really turned against America and started becoming the propaganda arm of those that wanted to destroy it. The 9/11 attack in 2001, they turned that upside down, saying it was a government conspiracy. They stopped showing pictures of people jumping out of the towers. Oh, it was going to offend people. Yeah, it should offend us because we got attacked and on our own soil, and we didn't like it. But the media didn't want to go there. They wanted to leave it alone. Afghanistan, China, Russia, the Russian hoax, the attacks on Donald Trump throughout his presidency, before and during and continuing until today, the January 6th hoax. So you see the media is part of that powerful army. The American university system and public education system, they have become indoctrination centers. I'm going to do a program to show you how that happened. But in the early 1900s, the universities were teaching Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations, which is the book written in the 1770s that laid out capitalism and a free market enterprise system. And the founding fathers used his writings and his outline to form a free market system in America that in 50 years became the greatest economy the world had ever known. So the education system, the universities, started taking him out, and guess who they put in? Yes, Karl Marx, his Communism Manifesto. So, are they part of that powerful armory? Yes. People come out of the universities and the public education systems with a hatred of America. A hatred of America. They have been taught that we're just this terrible nation. And I don't know how you turn it around in this generation. Government agencies are out there controlling businesses and outcomes, over-regulating, overtaxing, over fees. We just saw this ruling by the SCOTUS last Thursday, June 30th, that said government agencies, including the EPA and the rest of you, do not have the authority to do what you have been doing. Now, I wish they had taken that ruling one step further and says all those regulations that they are illegal and they are now null and void. I wish they had said that. That would have opened up the American economic system like you wouldn't believe. But they didn't go that far. But I think it's going to happen. I think you're going to see more and more lawsuits. Now, the Securities Exchange Commission, which oversees the stock market and public corporations and their filings and so forth, is trying to come out and say, you have to submit to us how you will affect climate change. What are you going to do to help climate change? Well, if I were these corporations right now, I would tell them to go blow, because they don't have the authority to do that. The American welfare system. Folks, bear with me on this one. This one's going to get a little complicated. The American welfare system was created under Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Now, there were two things that his administration were looking at, and he had communists in his administration. And we'll get into that in another lesson. This is going to be ongoing education. But you need to understand why and how we got to today in America. So he developed, there was two things, the welfare system or universal health care. And the general consensus from the administration was Americans will not buy universal health care. They won't like it. But we can set up a welfare system that they'll go for. And this was called the Great Plan. It was a plan to keep the working class in control. Did I misspeak? The non-working class. Now let's go back to Plato. It says, quote, the ideal society included the elimination of marriage and the family so that all the men belong to the women belong to the men and all the men belong to the women. Plato also wanted family to be communalized and intellectual energy devoted to determining what was good for the lower class, unquote. What better way to do this than through the welfare system that discouraged a father being in the picture? The government will be the father. The government will provide for you, but not under a family structure. Communalized. Sex is rampant in America. Just look at the reaction to the decision on Roe versus Wade. It is overwhelming. Overwhelming. The Internal Revenue Service has become a power unto itself, and it is way out of control. Look under Obama. They shut down conservative sites. They would not give a 501c3 rating to these conservative organizations. They refused. And when they were challenged, all of a sudden, Well, we can't find the records. Really? The IRS is using their power to control, threaten, and destroy individuals and businesses. And when possible, destroy families. Why do you think there is an inheritance tax? It is to destroy a family, its family business, its family farm, whatever it is. To take away its wealth so the rest of the family can't have it. The Federal Reserve Bank. They can literally control what happens in the American economy. This is why most of the founding fathers were vehemently against a central bank. They literally can control what happens. They're doing it right now in America. Inflation? Do you think this just happened? No, it was planned, folks. And now, with many central banks around the world, they can control the world economy. You have the European Central Bank. China has their central bank. Russia has theirs. On and on and on. And they're controlling what's happening. They can take money and they can give money. Right now, they're flooding the markets with money, which is causing the inflation. And yes, we're going to spend more time on that. These are not just teasers. I'm just trying to get a show done here today. Now, activist judges on federal benches. They have been making laws instead of rulings on current laws. This has been going on since after the Civil War. These activist judges. And then we get 5 and 6 justices on Supreme Court that's starting to rule as they're supposed to rule, and America's going nuts. The socialists and Marxists and communists and progressives and collectivists are going nuts because they want to destroy the Constitution. Now, one of the most glaring examples of making up law, it was John Roberts' ruling on the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, to make it legal. Even the other justices were shocked. He just came up with something out of the blue nobody had ever heard of before. Certainly wasn't in the Constitution. History is vital for us to understand, to move forward, to save America and its principles. All right. Plato. Yeah, I keep going back to Plato, folks, because this is the father of all of this. Another quote from the Republic. Listen carefully to what he says. Quote, "A tyranny is the wretchedest form of government, and a tyrant grows worse from having power. He becomes and is of necessity more jealous, more faithless, more unjust, more friendless, more impious than he was at first. He is a purveyor and cherisher of every sort of vice." Unquote. This description of tyranny and a tyrant may seem more relevant to our situation in America today. After all, we live in a constitutional republic in which the rights of the individual are protected by a written constitution and the rule of law. Right? But the question now is, how far are they actually protected in practice? And the next question is, how far will the tyrants go to complete Plato's vision of an ideal society in America? These are the questions I'm going to leave you with today. And then I'm going to leave you with something else. Now, our next program, episode 14, this is episode 13, episode 14, will be about the 2024 presidential election and some of my interesting thoughts. I've discussed this with several people and gotten quite a bit of feedback. And so that's going to be our next episode of the Medlock Post. But I want to finish with the fourth verse of the Star-Spangled Banner. Oh, thus be it forever, when free men shall stand between their loved homes and the war's desolation. Blessed with victory and peace, may the heaven-rescued land praise the power that hath made and preserved us a nation. Then conquer we must, when our cause it is just. And this be our motto, in God is our trust. And the Star-Spangled Banner in triumph shall wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave. And that, folks, is the Medlock Post for today. May God bless America.